Hey guys, okay, I know lecture 4 on body tissues looked pretty intense with all that crazy terminology, but honestly, take a deep breath. I've gone ahead and broken our notes down into a super clear visual study guide for this explainer so we can totally ace this exam together.
So, before we get into the heavy memorization, let's establish our foundation. Basically, a tissue is just a team of similar cells doing a specific job. These primary tissue types work together to keep the whole human body running smoothly. But keep in mind, if this teamwork breaks down, that's exactly when we see injury or disease. And really, that's exactly why understanding this stuff matters so much for our future practice.
All right, here's our game plan for the night. First, epithelial tissue. Second, connective tissue. Third, muscular tissue. Fourth, nervous tissue. And finally, we'll wrap up with a quick study review just to make sure it all actually stuck.
Okay, let's dive right in. This flowchart from the lecture is basically our master cheat sheet for the night. It shows exactly how literally all the tissues in the body are divided into those 4 categories: epithelial, connective, muscular, and nervous. So whenever you feel kind of lost in the weeds today, just picture this flowchart. It's your ultimate roadmap.
Moving right along to Section 1, epithelial tissue, which is basically the body's wrapping.
So epithelial tissue lines the external and internal surfaces of our body, handling things like protection, secretion, and absorption. Now, the ultimate trick to not getting tripped up on the test is just knowing the difference between simple and stratified. It's actually super straightforward. Simple epithelium is just one single layer thick, with all the cells resting right there on the basement membrane. Stratified? That just means multi-layered. Simple equals one, stratified equals many. That's it.
Now check out how the physical shape of these simple cells perfectly dictates their job. On the left side, we've got simple squamous cells. Notice how flattened out they are? Because they're so incredibly thin, they allow for rapid exchange of substances, which is exactly why they make up the walls of the alveoli in our lungs to trade oxygen. On the right, we have simple cuboidal cells. They look like little squares, right? And that thicker, blockier shape makes them perfect for absorption and secretion, kind of like what we see in the follicles of the thyroid gland.
Let's see how this builds when we stretch those cells out even further. With tall, simple columnar cells, you'll actually find them doing the heavy lifting for protection, secretion, and absorption in places like the fallopian tubes. Then, next to it is a tricky one, pseudostratified tissue. Remember, pseudo means false. It totally gives a false appearance of multiple layers because some cells are short and some are tall, but actually, scratch that, it is just one single layer resting on the basement membrane. The classic example to memorize here, the lining of our trachea.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point when we switch over to stratified or multi-layered tissues is identifying transitional epithelium. Look at the difference between a distended bladder and an empty one here. Transitional epithelium lines organs that specifically need to stretch out and distend without tearing. So, your urinary bladder is the perfect example.
We also have stratified squamous tissues, and they come in 2 flavors: non-keratinized ones that line wet surfaces like the esophagus, and keratinized ones making up our skin's epidermis. The keratinized ones have this really tough top layer of a protein called keratin. This is a brilliant defense mechanism. It literally stops water from evaporating out of our bodies when we're standing out in the hot sun, and it stops us from absorbing way too much water like a giant sponge while we're swimming.
Let's move to Section 2, connective tissue. Think of this as the body's glue.
Right, so if epithelial was the wrapping, connective tissue acts as the glue to provide support, connect components together, and exchange nutrients. Now, I'm not going to lie, this category is heavy on vocabulary, so I made this list of the specific cells you absolutely need to memorize. We've got fibroblasts, which synthesize fibrous, and fat-storing adipose cells that look kind of like little signet rings. We also have plasma cells making immunoglobulins, mast cells for handling inflammation, and macrophages, which basically act like the Pac-Man of your body to engulf foreign particles. Oh, and of course, your defensive leukocytes, or white blood cells.
And here is what all those different cells actually look like when they're crammed together under a microscope. Notice they aren't just floating around in empty space. They're suspended in a matrix made up of flexible collagen fibers offering tensile strength, stretchy elastic fibers that literally snap back to their normal size, and delicate reticular fibers forming structural frameworks in organs like the spleen.
To keep all this straight in your head for the exam, just remember that connective tissue splits into general types, like your loose, dense, and adipose tissues, and specialized types. The specialized ones include specific structures like your bones, cartilage, and hemolymphoid tissues. That last one just means your blood and lymphatics. And hey, don't let the professor trick you on the test. Blood is absolutely a connective tissue.
Okay, Section 3,
muscular tissue, the movers.
Thankfully, there are strictly 3 types to memorize here. First up, skeletal muscles that help you voluntarily move your limbs, like when you flex your biceps. Second, smooth muscles. These act entirely involuntarily and are present in your visceral organs, like the muscle in the wall of your stomach. And third, cardiac muscle, which only exists to do one job: pump blood in the heart.
Almost there. Section 4, nervous tissue, the messengers. Consisting of the central, peripheral, and autonomic nervous systems, these tissue is entirely responsible for sending information up to the brain, processing it, and then bringing the required responses right back down to the effector organs. It is quite literally how we interact with the world around us. Pretty amazing, right? Finally, Section 5, quick study review. Think of this as our mini final exam.
All right, question 1. Think way back to our very first principle tonight. Which of these 4 options accurately characterizes what a tissue is? Take a quick second to read through A, B, C, and D.
Well, if you remembered option C, that it's a group of similar cells working together on a specific function, you are definitely on track to pass. Like we said, tissues are the ultimate team players.
Okay, let's try one more tricky one. Which of these is composed of a collection of similar cells, but is used to make up just a part of an organ? Drum roll, the answer is smooth muscle tissue. Why? Because the stomach and the brain are entire organs made up of multiple tissues working together, not just tissues themselves. And a neuron, that's just a single cell. Awesome job today, guys. Honestly, you are completely ready for this test. But as you pack up your notes from this explainer, I want you to ask yourself this one last thing. Considering how incredibly specialized each tissue is, how do these 4 distinct types actually collaborate to make a massive, complex organ like the human heart function flawlessly every single second of your life? Think about that for a bit. I'll catch you all in our next study session.